Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Wednesday, July 16th, 2025, and today we're going to talk bindweed, planet-altering land management, the good kind, and what happens when compost freezes. So let's do it. All right, well, welcome to Wednesday, everyone. Halfway through the week and halfway through the month and halfway through the year, kind of all the things. August will be here soon enough, and that means we are officially careening towards the fall. So I hope you all are ready. I feel somewhat ready. Also, throughout the season, feel free to send us your little clips from your farms. We loved seeing those these last couple of weeks, so just email us a 20-second clip and tell us how your gardens are doing. How is it going this season? You can send that to farmermike@notillgrowers.com. I've really enjoyed seeing those. That's so much fun, and I know they don't always translate to those of you who are just listening to the podcast, but just know that they are awesome and that I appreciate all of you for sharing the little bits of your farm and garden, and we appreciate everyone for being so supportive of those people who have submitted. This audience rules. This seems to be the week I want to try on new ideas that are just popping around in my brain and just see how they come out and hit with you all. It started yesterday with farmer royalties, which some great comments resulted in the comment section there. So we will discuss those on Friday. But today, why not planet-altering land management? But specifically, the types of solutions we need for a even vaguely sustainable future can have small elements, but by and large, they need to be enormous. What I mean is that in order to make a significant difference in water cycling, desertification, ecological health, and environmental resilience, small farms alone are not going to cut it. Don't get me wrong, small farms have their place. They are an excellent proving ground, for instance. They diversify our diets. I own one. I love it. It has more bugs and birds and snakes every year. Great stuff. So we need them, but also we need bigger solutions, and not just bigger solutions, but solutions that can be seen from space size solutions or, thereabouts, or solutions with can be seen from space results. So what exactly does that look like? Well, first, it doesn't actually start with land management or farms. It starts with what we stop doing. I know solar and wind and hydro and all those things have their issues, but the primary types of energies that we rely on here currently are not only incredibly polluting, but are relatively short-sighted. One day we will run out of them and or they will get too expensive for us to utilize. I'm not, of course, saying anything that anyone doesn't know, but non-renewable means that they ain't coming back. Wind, hydro, solar, these are forces that will be here long after we are gone, and we need to put energy and time into understanding how to better maximize them without affecting ecology and all those good things. We call them renewable, but we don't have to renew them. They are just existing. We need to collect and recycle energy that we already use. Roads that collect power, stadiums that collect fan stomping power, gyms that collect power from energy used to lift weights, a small secondary grid based on recycling some of the power we already use. And the reason that I started with power and its pollution is that in order for agriculture and land management to be effective, at least an effective means of stabilizing the planet, the job can't just continue to get harder and harder every year like it is right now. Next, public lands need to be managed better. They need to be managed for invasives, rotationally grazed in some circumstances, which is to some extent what recent legislation and executive actions in the U.S. have opened up. But those lands need to not be drilled and plundered for mining and economic growth, which is also what some of that same recent legislation and executive action in the U.S. has also opened up. We need to likewise take desertification seriously. Desertification is increasingly threatening much of the western U.S., due in part to urbanization, but also changes in weather pattern and poor use of agricultural land and water, etc., with something like 40% of the U.S. under threat, according to the UN, which means picking a front, a place where desertification is encroaching, and stopping it through good land management, pushing it back the other way from whence it came. Part of that is urbanization has to be restricted at some point. I know that's not going to be a popular opinion, but city limits must become the actual limits of a city at some point, which will require inspiration and creativity to ensure people get housed. But at some point, cities can't just keep growing indefinitely. We need to take wildfire prevention seriously, sometimes fighting fires with fire, i.e. controlled burns, but likewise, just better large-scale land management overall, not just farms. Then we just need more ecological farming overall, across the board, lots of it. I've been impressed and encouraged by what I've seen on small farms, how they are able to change the ecology and soil health and vibrancy of an area, both environmentally and economically as well, but that needs to ultimately be 1,000x, if not 1,000,000 times bigger agriculture. Not intensive vegetable farms all the way across, obviously, that would be a lot of lettuce, but larger scale caloric agriculture that embraces cover cropping, hedges, some agroforestry, crop diversity, and incentivizing maybe livestock managers and croppers to work together to get more uses out of a single parcel of land and discourage the most polluting versions of livestock management, obviously. I have likewise been interested in efforts to stop desertification to stave off the expanding Sahara in places like Nigeria. In fact, although there is some dispute about causes, like there always are with every environmental history, around 8,000 years ago, the Sahara was not a desert. It was humid and rich with life, and a shift in weather due to a tilt in the Earth's axis apparently caused the monsoons to shift, helping to lead to the great desert we know today. Some have proposed that human activity at the time may have accelerated the decline, but there is research that also suggests that human activity, grazing and land management for thousands of years, actually helped stave off the desertification by 500 years. Quote, increasing human population and sustainable pastoralism did not accelerate and may have even delayed the decline of the Green Sahara. End quote. Again, we like to think of humans as this consistent negative entity on the earth, but humans do have the ability that we proved for thousands of years to improve the land they live on, if they want to. Notably, or poignantly, the Sahara is roughly the same size as the United States, but basically it can be done. And to some extent it is being done there in parts, which is very cool, but it needs to be done everywhere. When I say we should be able to see the effects of our work from space, I just mean green. This rock, this country, this continent should be mostly green and blue with large white ice sheets on the top and bottom, and little else. We should be able to see all that brown shrink, not grow. Is this dumb and idealistic or unrealistic? Yeah, duh, of course it is. It has to be. At some point, we have to start treating the declining health of our Earth seriously because it ain't going to be solved passively or by individual choices or just by ignoring it. But it can be done. We just have to make the decision collectively that we want it to be done for our kids and our grandkids, that it will be hard, but it will be beautiful and productive. In the 1940s, people who were not at the war had to make sacrifices at home, using less and growing victory gardens. We need that kind of level of patriotism again with much bigger victory gardens. This time, though, to fight for the health of the land we stand on. I have found myself more and more interested in larger scale ecological solutions, like, for instance, staving off the growing Sahara. And we'll talk about them more in time as I come across them. But they need funding and public support. Like, we have to get behind these ideas or nothing is going to change. More than anything, this place just needs people to care. So much so that they're willing to take on the unrealistic, because what's really unrealistic is thinking that we can just keep going on like this and that everything's going to be fine, because that is the most unrealistic thing. Anyway, I figured that is what we needed to discuss on this Wednesday. Why not? It's middle of July. Let's do it. But I'll leave the rest of the good conversation to you all in the comment section, and we can revisit saving and beautifying and enriching the planet on Feedback Friday or other Wednesdays, maybe even a Tuesday from time to time. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we will talk about bindweed. That seems like a perfectly normal transition. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. If you're listening to this, you probably found 5 rare minutes to breathe. But what got pushed back further down the to-do list to make that happen? If it's your CSA newsletter, you're not alone. Farmhand's new newsletter builder was made for busy farmers. It automates weekly emails, drives add-on sales, and makes it easy to keep your customers in the loop without spending hours behind a screen. It launches this summer, but our listeners can request early access now. Visit farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions now. Today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Blair Aiken, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. Hope you are well. I'm in North Idaho, inland northwest, at a small urban farm where we are fighting an intensifying battle with bindweed. Seriously, we had no bindweed about 5 years ago, and now it looks like ground cover in several of our wood-chipped pathways. We are weeding it out by hand as thoroughly as possible from key areas like our tunnels, but it's starting to feel impossible to stem the tide. We just uncovered 2 plots that had been tarped for several months to a year and discovered that bindweed had spread under 4 layers of tarp. It had been folded. My 2 related questions are, have you ever had success dealing with bindweed or a similar type of weed? And also, is it trying to tell us something about our soil? I've wondered about this, about our other weeds as well, purslane, chickweed, dandelions, etc. When we see persistent issues with weeds on certain areas of our farm, could it be nature's response to compaction, not enough biodiversity, etc., thereby implying if we address the compaction or other soil health issues, though of course that is our goal anyway, are weed pressure will lessen? How should we think about what weeds communicate to us about our soil health? Thanks so much for your incredible work here. End quote. All right, thanks, Blair. And truly a bummer about the bindweed. That is such a brutal weed to have to deal with. So a couple things come to mind reading through your questions here. First, you brought up an interesting nuance to tarping that when tarps are folded on one another, sure, some of the stuff underneath will die, but a lot of it won't, because without that coupling of the heat with the darkness, the crop won't suffocate quite as easily. Also, I'm going to assume that the bindweed had plants photosynthesizing around the outside of the tarp, which would feed those roots while the tarp kind of kept the roots warm and happy and moist. The only way I know to generally get rid of bindweed is a solid year under a tarp with these sides well pinned down. Single layer, obviously, don't fold it tight to the ground. Even then, you may have it come back from time to time and have to fight it by, carefully digging up the roots, as you said you were. Now, I've not had to deal with bindweed myself, but I've had, like you mentioned, other pretty rough rhizomatous weeds, such as Canadian thistle and Johnson grass and Bermuda grass, and we've had to deal with those. And it usually comes down to a pairing of tarping, then mulching, and then vigilance to get those things, just kept in order and kept in check. And obviously, no seed rain. You cannot let anything go to seed. So if you see those flowers on the bindweed, that's like an alarm bell. It doesn't make much sound, but it's an alarm bell. This may just be harder with certain weeds like your bindweed in certain situations and climates. No easy way around it. Now, to your question about weeds and do they tell us anything about the soil, I think I did do a segment on this before, even looked into some of the research, and basically what I had laid out, I think, in that episode, and then I'll link that in the show notes, is that yes, some weeds have pretty specific nutritional contextual needs, but by and large, weeds are just advantageous recovery species that just grow wherever there's bare soil or loose soil and the seeds exist. Maybe one weed thrives over another, and that could give you some indication of your soil chemistry or conditions, but honestly, they should probably not make it far enough for the grower to see which of them is thriving. Usually, weeds just indicate the presence of water, sunlight, and weed seeds in bare soil. So yeah, keep the weed seeds from germinating, keep the weed seeds down, keep the soil covered as much as possible, disturb it as little as possible, and make sure it stays planted. And that all definitely helps with weed management. Anyway, I hope that was somewhat helpful. Great questions, though, Blair, and I always hate to hear when folks are struggling with weeds like that. So I wish you all the best. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, what happens when compost freezes? Be right back. All right, once again, I'm trying to catch up on Patreon questions this week a bit. I just had 6 more new ones come in yesterday, which is super rad, and please keep them coming, Patreon members. I know I always say that I will get to questions from everywhere that questions come in, but for real, Patreon has grown a ton, and I thank you for that, but that means there's a lot of questions over there to answer. And so if you really have a burning question, that is definitely the best route, patreon.com/no-till-growers. Today's other and last question comes to us from Laurel in Northwestern Ontario, who writes, quote, I have composted for years. Usually finished compost is applied in the spring. This is compost that was made the year before. I currently have 2 piles cooking. In our area, the winters are cold, around -30 degrees or more. The compost in these piles will freeze solid. How does this affect it? End quote. All right, this is a cool question. Thank you. So there are not a ton of studies on this exact thing that I can find, i.e. what happens to microbial makeup in a compost pile after it freezes. There are studies on soil and freezing and freeze-thaw cycles and how, in many cases, freezing does not have a significant impact on the diversity. Fungi have a harder time than bacteria, but especially in a climate like yours, the microbial makeup of what is present in your compost pile is likely to already have some cold resilience. So I can't say for sure, but what I can say is that let's say you have a pile that you finished the composting process in the fall, and it's going to hang out just over the winter. I would cover it, and then in the spring, I would add a compost tea to it just to ensure that it gets a good range of microbes. And that's not just because of the freezing temperatures, that's just because I would do that anyway. After that hot composting stage, the microbial diversity is going to be lower regardless. It's in that curing stage that a lot of the diversity is returned, or can be. In your case, the curing stage is somewhat arrested, so it's not the worst idea to enhance that a bit with perhaps a compost tea made from some compost that you keep in a warmer place, plus perhaps a small pinch of forest soil, just for a little spice. And by spice, I mean local microbiology. Make a small tea out of that and toss it in with the compost, like literally turn the compost and add the tea and spread it throughout the pile. And that will act not only as insurance, but as a nice little microbial bonus. By and large, microbes are pretty resilient, especially those already adapted to those, sort of extreme conditions. That explosion of growth you see in the summers there, a huge part of that is the local microbiology, making the nutrients available for the plants. So even if not everything you might want survives, what is already in the soil will utilize and salute the work of those microbes that they did in the compost pile, breaking down the compost ingredients from the previous year. Anyway, commenters, feel free to add your 2 cents, and I hope that was helpful. And I think we are done with this midweek day. Don't forget, No-Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations, they're tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can learn more about how to do that in the comments section. Please make sure to like and subscribe and/or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor this show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at no-tillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. That is such a huge help to us. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of July, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Julie Rainey, Brooke Dawson, and Jenny Kenworthy. Jenny Kenworthy, that's a fun, bouncy name too. All right, so back to the story of the man who wakes up with a new career in his brain every day. Some of the challenges with that are that, one, you have to not look like a crazy person alerting the authorities. That's a challenge. Two, somehow managing to not get, like a hit put on yourself by alerting the authorities. And three, there is no easy way to get that message to a famous individual, in this case, a quite beloved actor. So he does what anyone would do in a story like this. He gets online and tries to figure out why anyone would, want to off this particular individual, and learns deep in the annals of Reddit, of course, that they are seeing that this particular famous person is seen quite a bit in the casinos, like a lot. So perhaps it's a gambling debt, because he knows the day it's supposed to go down, and it's in his brain, 2 days from now. He knows how much time he has to fix the problem. What he doesn't know is who he will wake up to be the next time he goes to sleep. What he ultimately does to remedy this situation, well, that is for tomorrow on The Fixes in Your Brain. No, that's not it. It's actually something like way better than that. It's great. You'd love it. Anyway, thanks for watching and/or listening. We will see you tomorrow. Bye.